But, we hear $600 silver, $500 silver, $1,000 silver, silver equal to the price of gold. I mean, there's a lot of commentators in this space that will say things that are, in my view, unreasonable. I like to say, look, we're going to get to 100, and I've said it. We got to get through 50 first. So let's worry about getting through the $50 mark and see what happens at that time, and then maybe make some, further forecasts and projections. I think it's, let me restate. Well, I've been a hard asset guy, and I am a specialist in precious metals, as you outlined, Jack. But really, we do, in the Morgan Report, the paid service, we look at the resource sector. So, like, for example, we were the first to talk about rare earth elements. So most people hadn't heard the nomenclature. Lithium, some of the battery metals, and on it goes. But I've always been a believer in hard assets. I've done stock investing. Started investing in stocks at 16 years of age, which is illegal because you can't contract till 18. But my dad signed what's called the Uniform Gift of Miners Act, which allowed me, because of his blessing, to start trading. So obviously I've been very interested in this field my whole life. And as far as I'm concerned, I really like the hard asset sector. But real estate to me is the ultimate hard asset. We have to remember that it's always denominated. And if that currency weakens, then the value shifts with it. And I did a look, and we'll talk about it later, but I compared gold versus real estate for a 25-year time frame, 20-year time frame, 10-year time frame, and 5-year time frame. And actually gold outperformed real estate in all those time frames. However, I didn't find out if that was with rents or whatever. I mean, it's a little more complicated than just looking at the CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate. And I think you should have both. I mean, I think I've never been a gold bug, gold only, or that. But the amount of gold that is really required to balance a portfolio is rather astonishing. I recommended 10% in the book, Investing Rules. I did this section on silver investing, and 10% was a recommendation. But CPM Group out of New York recommends a 25%, looking from 1968 till present day. And Mr. Gunlatch just was on CNBC, I believe. I just posted on my Twitter about 10 minutes before we connected for this interview, and he's recommending as high as 25%. Ibbotson and Associates, which has done an independent study years ago, probably about 15 years ago, their take on all markets, inflation, deflation, stagflation, was about 15%. So I'm pretty conservative at 10. But regardless, I think real estate's a good way, especially as you get older. Really, it's all about cash flow. And gold doesn't cash flow, but it's extremely liquid. Real estate does cash flow, but it's not. It's illiquid. My friend Catherine Austin Fitz, and I don't expect any of your viewers to know of her, but I've known her for some time. She runs Solari, look it up. But she actually goes as far as to say that, Bitcoin is kind of a situation that is diverting funds that may have gone into other asset classes, particularly the precious metals, into that asset class. And I've made the same argument. Really, the idea is that we need to sell this debt to somebody. And this is a very, very lucrative and easy avenue for the ability to sell more and more debt into a willing buyer. The problem is, as I said, and I think it bears repeating, is really when you analyze it, getting into cryptocurrency XYZ or even Bitcoin, what do you cash out in? And the answer is US dollar. I will not discount the move that Bitcoin has made. I mean, from dollars into the $100,000 range, this is phenomenal as far as percentage gain is concerned. But on the final analysis, you're still stuck with dollars at the end of the day. Although Tether has talked about, and I haven't looked at it very hard, I do a lot in any given day or week or year, but purportedly they're working toward a perhaps gold component to the stable coin, which could kind of flip this thing around a little bit. Because then if people are saying, well, I don't really like the dollar, but since Tether's putting some of the dollars outside of the treasury market or the debt market into gold as well, I might be more interested. So it's starting to get to the point where, there's this real psychological battle going on between what I would call as an Austrian schooled economists to be good money versus bad money. Gold has held its value for thousands of years, and paper money always fails when it's
Real estate is often described as the ultimate hard asset, yet it is inseparable from currency, leverage, and debt. When money weakens, asset prices can rise nominally while real value stagnates. Long-term comparisons show that gold has quietly outperformed real estate across multiple time horizons, even before accounting for rents or maintenance. The lesson is not to choose one over the other, but to understand their roles. Real estate generates cash flow but lacks liquidity. Gold offers liquidity but no yield. A resilient portfolio balances both, with precious metals acting as financial insurance rather than speculation.
Yeah, when gold was taken out of the equation back on August 15th, 1971, under Richard Nixon, he said it was a temporary thing. Of course, it wasn't. And then things really did accelerate as far as the devaluation of the currency from that point till now. And yes, there have been some cryptos that are associated with gold, silver, or both. In fact, I was involved with one for quite some time, put in my own money and a lot of time, and it failed. It was really not managed properly. I'll just be kind with those words. There are others. There's one called Kinesis. There's others that are out there. And I always, even when I was involved with one, said it's a tool in the toolbox. You know, it's not your primary gold holding. It would be something where, you know, like maybe a backup credit card or something where you have liquidity, you could spend it if you need it or buy it quickly, but don't look at it as your primary investment. I made that very clear, and I would say that to anybody that's looking for it. But yeah, that's something that has real value. That's what I'm looking for in the, you know, crypto space. And there are several, you know, that are tied to cobalt, tied to gold, silver, tied to real estate, tied to something tangible. So there is value in and of the crypto itself, whereas a lot of them are just basically a cut and paste from Bitcoin with a different, you know, label on it, or Ethereum or whatever. So since a lot of this is open source, you can just basically make your own and put a name on it. So a lot of these will fail because there's really no intrinsic value to them. And the fad will kind of blow off like the NFT. I mean, the NFT was a real big fad for a while. It's kind of subsided quite a bit. There's still some uses for it, but not that many in my view. And so, yeah, I think you're right, Jack, that we've got to look at this with, you know, very clear thinking, critical thinking view. Whereas what does this really do and why is it there? Yeah, it has. I mean, real estate runs on leverage most of the time because people borrow and get a mortgage. Gold and silver run on trust. And when the debt cost goes up, one asset gets squeezed and the other one shines. So if you start seeing squeeze on interest rates because of mistrust of the dollar, that means it costs more to service the debt, especially if a variable interest loan, which not many people do, but they're out there. But if you wanted to, you know, sell off an apartment complex and reinvest, and you've sold something that you got a 3% loan on, and now you've got to go into the next building with, you know, 7.5% loan, that you're going to pencil that out. Whereas usually in those environments of uncertainty and mistrust of government, mistrust of the financial system, that's when the gold and silver markets really take them.
Cryptocurrencies have absorbed enormous capital over the past decade, often diverting attention away from traditional stores of value. While their price performance has been extraordinary, the deeper question remains: what do investors ultimately settle into? For most, the answer is still fiat currency. This raises a critical issue. Are digital assets solving the problem of debt and currency debasement, or simply repackaging it? Some experiments aim to link digital systems to physical assets like gold or silver, but history shows most innovations fail before a few endure. Sound money debates are far from over.
That's really the most important one. I mean, one of my flaws is, you know, being well-versed in the topic. I kind of don't start at, you know, the most fundamental case which you're building, and I think that's very important. So first of all, gold and silver are the easiest financial instruments you can buy. The reason is that if you want to do a stock account or a bond account or a real estate even, there's some criteria that you have to meet before you can make the purchase, especially on a home or an apartment or whatever. You're going to qualify for a loan. Gold and silver are the simplest things. You don't have to have any qualifications. You can go into your local coin dealer in your town, and most sizable towns have one or two. Walk in with cash, put the cash down on the counter, and walk out with some gold coins or silver coins or both. So it's really the simplest thing to do. Where do you do it? Well, you could do it over the counter, face to face with the coin dealer that's located near where you live. That's one way. The way it's done primarily now with the internet, of course, is an online gold dealer, gold and silver dealer. You can find them. They're pretty competitive, and you can actually do it with a wire or a check, or some will take cryptocurrency. There's a lot of ways to negotiate a purchase. And in my book, the book's Investing Rules, the 10 Rules of Silver Investing that I wrote so many years ago, I said to start small. You don't want to make a big mistake. I said, oh my goodness, I've got this much, 10% is this. That's a big number. And I'm going to put it into gold and silver. I'm going to put it in 50% gold for make one purchase, and all of a sudden you bought the wrong time or you bought the wrong kind. So I teach people start small. Go in there. I'm going to put, make up a number, $5,000. Buy 500 and see how it goes. See how comfortable you are. A lot of people just get the message, realize that inflation is incessant. It's not going away. It destroys currencies over time. And they get a little excited and they kind of go overboard and do it without discipline. I actually advocate most people to use dollar cost averaging. So, put $100 a month, 1,000 or whatever your capabilities are, following the guidelines I've outlined. And I think that's the best.
Different assets respond differently to trust and interest rates. Real estate thrives on leverage, borrowing, and stable financing costs. Precious metals thrive on confidence, or the lack of it. When interest rates rise due to inflation or fiscal stress, debt-based assets feel pressure, while gold and silver often regain relevance. History repeatedly shows that during periods of institutional mistrust, hard money outperforms financial promises. This is not ideology. It is behavior. As borrowing costs climb and refinancing becomes painful, liquidity and portability regain importance. Gold does not depend on policy decisions to exist.
Well, I think in my own, classification or specialty, there's a lot of exuberance, irrational exuberance. People talking about $100 silver, which I've done. I wrote that in 2003. It's in print. But, we hear $600 silver, $500 silver, $1,000 silver, silver equal to the price of gold. There's a lot of commentators in the space that will say things that are, in my view, reasonable. I like to say, look, if we're going to get to 100, and I've said it, we got to get through 50 first. So let's worry about getting through the $50 mark and see what happens at that time, and then maybe make some, further forecasts or projections. I think it's, let me restate that. My strong belief that silver was the most emotional investment, more than real estate, more than stocks, more than bonds, more than almost anything else, because the expectation for the little guy, the underdog investment, to go from zero to hero was high expectations, because it did it in 1980. The highest price silver had ever gotten after being taken out of circulation, as outlined early, 1965. We went through the Johnson slug. From that time to 1979, it went from $1.29 the ounce, which is the monetary price, up to about $6. It had basically kept up with the true rate of inflation over that time. $1.29 to $6 is a bigger number, and it kept your purchasing power about the same. But then in 1 year, it went from 6 to 50. It went up almost tenfold. And people saw that, remembered that, and had these huge expectations that silver could do it again. And it has, not to that amount, but significant. And so they get these expectations. But these are things that happen rarely. In fact, I wrote an article in Futures Magazine, which is a bit of a feather in my cap. They don't let just anyone write for them. And my article was called Spiked. And I wrote about spiked as silver spikes higher and it spikes lower. And those are things to take advantage of. It spikes high, sell, spikes low, buy. That's the basis of the article. So I think unreasonable expectations is probably the main thing. And the other one that I wrote about on my Twitter feed was the manipulation argument, which is much more than we want to go into, Jack, at this time. But yes, almost all markets are quote unquote manipulated to some level. But my belief has been proven out by the market itself, is that in the long term, no market can be. Oil's going to go higher. It's going to go higher. It might be shot down a few times for different reasons, political or otherwise. But in the long run, markets are going to basically go with it.
One overlooked advantage of gold and silver is simplicity. Unlike stocks, bonds, or property, they require no approval, no credit checks, and no intermediaries. Anyone can acquire them directly. However, discipline matters. Rushing in with large emotional purchases often leads to regret. A measured approach, starting small, using dollar-cost averaging, and learning through experience reduces risk. Precious metals should be accumulated deliberately, not chased impulsively. Inflation is persistent, not sudden, and protecting purchasing power is a process. The goal is stability over time, not dramatic overnight gains.
To put it was, though, I use a business coach from time to time, and, my business falling off, as I mentioned earlier, I thought, well, what can I do? I do a lot of stuff for free, a lot of education like we're doing now, and thank you for the invite. But, so I got to talking, and I've written, 3 books, and I was thinking, people don't read that much anymore. Everything's video. They're on their, their device, and they're watching the video or TikTok or whatever. So he said, well, why don't you do a documentary? I'm like, oh man, I've never done one. But the more I thought through, the more I thought, yeah, it could definitely have an impact. So I took a different approach to the monetary question without leaving the basics out, like you brought me back on. All right, how do you buy gold the first time? What do you look for? What do you look to avoid? Same type of approach here. So it basically goes through monetary history and what happens and what the likely future is. But it also talks a lot about the stress and fear and control that money has over people's lives and how important we are in the human experience to overcome some of these challenges. Money is important, but it's not the only thing that's important. I also tie that to energy, because as much as people believe money makes the world go round, it's really energy that makes the world go round. And if we had free energy or abundant energy, and we're able to give people what they needed energy-wise, we would have a very, very thriving world. And we don't. So we question kind of some of these energy parameters that we're all taught to believe that are not necessarily true, what the future could hold. So it's hopefully thought-provoking. I'm not saying, good, bad, right, wrong. You got to think like I think. I want you to think on your own. And I provide, I think, enough information from enough sources for people to come out of the experience of watching the documentary, perhaps rethinking their relationship with money, how important it is, and how they can really think about what they need to do for their own personal lives, their family lives, maybe even their corporate lives, on a basis of how to balance out some of these stresses that.
Few assets trigger emotion like silver. Its dramatic spikes in history created expectations that are rarely realistic. Markets move in cycles, not straight lines, and extreme forecasts often distract from practical strategy. Long-term value is shaped by supply, demand, and trust, not headlines. No market can be permanently suppressed, nor can it defy fundamentals forever. Ultimately, this discussion goes beyond prices. Money influences stress, control, and decision-making across society. Understanding its history and its limits allows individuals to respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally. The objective is clarity, resilience, and independent thinking.